Hey, thank you so much for being here at Discover Church this morning. And a few months ago, as we were just planning out the year and the things that we wanted to do here at Discover Church, we came up with this crazy idea that we'd love to be able, every once in a while, just to have a casual conversation, a few moments on a Sunday morning, where we would just interact with different people that have amazing life stories. And so this morning, Jim Joyce is here with us, and I met Jim back maybe like 6 months ago, or maybe even a year.
It's probably been longer, about a year.
Yeah, maybe a year ago. Time flies. And so I was introduced to him through Daniel originally, and Jim attends Cross Point Church here in Norman, and they had a skate park, and we were interested in that skate park, and they were interested in us maybe teaming up or something with them. And so anyway, we met a couple times and talked, and then all this time passes, like forever. And I see this guy come into our service back a month or so ago, and have you ever had one of those moments, where you're like, I know him from somewhere? And I thought, man, he looks familiar. I've met him probably in Super C or something, And so anyway, some time passed, and I don't know if it was that service or maybe another one, but I walked up to him and I was like, I know you. I know who you are. And he looked at me because he knew me, I could tell, and I was embarrassed almost. And he was like, skate park, Cross Point, and I was like, oh yeah, I know where I know you now. And but from that point on, just different acquaintances that we've had through Matt and Brandy Lorenz and whatever. And then Jim's come to some Bible studies that we've had here at the church. Jim has an amazing story about his life, and so John and I have asked him to come here this morning, and just for us, just to sit back and to kind of share a little bit of that story with us, Jim. And then I really think you're going to be blessed. I think that you're going to be able to see maybe some of this story in you, or maybe you're going through some of the stuff that Jim has went through in the past, and you can identify. And I want to give you an opportunity through this time, over the next few moments. If you'd like to ask Jim a question yourself, we're going to put a number up on the screen, and it would be appropriate, not all the time is it appropriate while we're talking up here, that you pull your phones out and text. I think it's just kind of rude, personally. But if you want to pull your phone out during this time and you want to text Jim a question, you're more than welcome to. John will receive that text, and then he'll go through some of those. We might not be able to get to every one of them, but if we can, we'll get to some of those questions maybe that you'd have about Jim's life as he's talking, and John will ask those questions to him as well. So anyway, it's great to have you here this morning, Jim. I really appreciate you coming and being a part. Tell us just a little bit about, kind of start at the beginning for us, if you will. Tell us kind of how your life started out and kind of do that story, if you can.
Sure, absolutely. This story is different every time I tell it, so I hope you guys get a good version today. When I guess we'll start at, I left my parents' house when I was 14 or 15 years old because I didn't like the rules there, and I wanted to live my life my own way. And so I moved up to Oklahoma City, and over the course of the next several years, started using drugs, started hanging out with the wrong crowd. You guys have heard this story before. Even among people that have this story, when I find it's better not to go into the details of it, but in some of the details of it, people will say, man, how are you still alive? Just because it just was so bad at certain times, and just really the theme, I would say, of those several years was selfishness and manipulation. I just wanted what I wanted, and I didn't care how I had to get it or what I had to do, and I'm just living for myself. Time progresses, same lifestyle. I ended up, I was going to have a kid, got a girl pregnant, was not married, didn't have anything to do with the child at first. Ended up shortly after that, got in some trouble with the law, was looking at some jail time. So find myself in a place years later where I'm looking at 25 to life and have an 8-month-old son that I've never seen or had anything to do with. And, that's kind of a wake-up call when you realize that, I could be, I could have a son that's 25 years old before I could see him. Just kind of, it'll wake you up and kind of shake you up. And it did. And you would think that would be enough for a person, but and I did a whole lot better for a time after that. I got my act cleaned up a little bit, and but then about 8 months after all of that happened, I fell back in with the same crowd, same people. It's hard to break out of that when you're there. But after that, I kind of got back into it. My whole life I've kind of had a feeling like it was going to be okay, or that I was protected, or just didn't have any fear of bad stuff that was going to happen. But in this next several months, I look at it now as I think that God pulled away from me, like that He was protecting me up until that point. But then there was a time definitely when He pulled away, and that fear was there. I started to see the evil in my heart and the evil in the hearts of those around me, and the consequences that were going to come if there wasn't a life change. There was, I won't get into too much detail, but a real, very present fear at times that things are not going to be okay. That I was on a path to either probably death or prison, and I realized. You could see the evil and the darkness there, and realized that I didn't want any part of that anymore. But then what do you do? So I was able to, fortunately, move out of the situation where I was in and just get away from everyone. And it was through that I was able to, my grandmother invited me to go to church with her, and so through going to church with her, I was able to find out where I did need to be, away from the darkness and into the light, if you will. And it's hard to look and to see how someone in something so dark as I know my life and myself to be can find so much joy and so much happiness and so much peace as where I am now. God has just filled me with. If you get any time to spend around me, you'll see that I always have a smile on my face. I'm always laughing, and God has just filled me with a spirit of joy, and I'm so thankful for that. I don't know, God sometimes lets us go through bad times, through hard times, maybe for such a time as this, to be something that people can look at and say, you know what, this guy, you would never believe where he came from. So
tell me though, when you start out, and I hear that you get messed up with maybe a wrong crowd. You were telling me though that it's not like your home life was horrible or anything, right?
No, not really.
Was. Tell me about what that was like.
Yeah, we had one of the questions that came in while you were talking was what led you to the drugs and stuff. What was there anything specific that led you into that?
No, I wouldn't say so. It starts very, very easily. And I would say the one thing, parents, that you can do is to just be involved in your kids' lives. Know what they're doing. Because that was one thing that, my parents had gotten divorced when I was 10. And so they were both kind of dealing with their own issues and struggles. And, maybe their focus really wasn't on me for the next 2 or 3 years. And in those 2 or 3 years, there were some kids in the neighborhood, we'd hang out at the creek, and hey, here, smoke this cigarette, and, when the next thing is something else, and then, going through, puberty and all that stuff, you have all this emotion and feelings, and, it got down to where I was just fighting with my mom, fighting with my dad, and then I was like, all right, I'm out of here. you know.
So it seems like you had a pretty normal life up to that point, and then everything kind of.
I went to church with the family as a kid, and all that stuff. But
that makes nobody exempt, is what it tells me. I mean, that's the scary part of that. I think is that, especially us with kids, no matter if they're little bitty or they're, teenagers or even grown now, I guess, but we're just not exempt from the enemy coming in and really infiltrating our families and doing something to them that that we wouldn't want them to do. In that, so you get messed up in this drug, and then you moved out at, you said age, what was it? 15. 15. Mm-hmm. So where do you go at that point? I mean,
actually, my story is kind of different there. I lived on 113th in North Council when I was 15. Moved in with a guy who was older and would, buy us beer or whatever. So we kind of had the party house, if you will. But I drove from 113th in North Council to Norman to school every day and back. So 45 minutes one way. Would drive down here, go to school, and go back. Because even, I didn't want to be a total failure at life. That wasn't my goal. I still knew I needed to graduate high school and, do those things. But just there were a lot of other, lifestyle. I would say, it goes back again to the selfishness that this is what I want to do, and I want to party, and I want to live this way, and I want to do these things, and I'm one of those kind of people that, I'm going to get what I want, if I can. And so it was in that that God kind of came into my heart and changed what I want, So, but yeah, that was the beginning kind of.
And so you got mixed up in all that stuff, and then you said that the child came along the way. But did you know that at first, or was there some time there before you found out? Because we've all made mistakes, and I hesitate to say a child was a mistake. That's not the case at all. Yeah. So through that experience,
exactly what you mean. Because looking back on it now, I can see, in reading like Focus on the Family Studies and things like that, I really wish that I would have done it the right way. You know what I mean? I see the benefit of having both parents there and all of that stuff, but I wouldn't change it.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I found out. I kind of knew, but I found out very early on that she was pregnant, and I actually thought that this was going to be the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was like, well, my life is over because I'm having a kid. And, he actually gave, I came up with the money and gave it to his mom for an abortion, and that was the plan. It was like, okay, but God, I guess, got a hold of her through her mother, and she didn't have the abortion, and I'm so thankful for that every day, because my son is one of the biggest blessings in my life.
It's amazing how many people go through that same story. I mean, my wife worked at a crisis pregnancy center, and John's wife did too, for several years, and we would hear that same story over and over and over. You just feel so desperate. You feel like there has to be a way out, and that you have to finish everything. But even through the story that you're telling us today, that there's even in something maybe that we've done that wasn't exactly correct, there still could be purpose in that. There is purpose in that, in the future. And it's amazing. It's great that God seen fit to be able to work that out, so that our, maybe like what you were saying, your manipulation and your selfish motivation was, let's make that stop. But God's plan for you is so much bigger than probably even you knew at the time, wasn't it? I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We had some questions come in. One, obviously, you didn't do 25 to life in prison, but
I'd still be there.
It asked, did God spare you from prison? So,
yes, He did.
How did that come about?
It was a crazy deal. Without getting into too much of the details of it, I was at a house that was raided, and the items that I had just recently acquired turned out to be a different substance. So, I got ripped off, didn't know it yet, but ended up not going to prison. Wow. So, it was one of those God things, I guess.
If God does work through that, it would definitely be in that time, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for ripping me off and not giving me the quality that I needed.
Yeah.
So, I can see. Last week we talked about purpose in life, and God having a purpose for us. It's not just to get up and go to work every day. It's not just the mundane, but there is a major reason for us to be here on this earth and to serve Him. And I see this, you going through all of this stuff, and then you said that you spend some time with your grandma, you move back in with her. Mm-hmm. So tell us about that experience, about your grandma.
My grandma was great, just a real godly woman. I just had to get out of the place where I was. I didn't care how that had to happen. And my grandma, welcomed me into her home. I don't know if that was prompted by something that she felt convicted of or something like that to help me. But she welcomed me to her home, and that was just a time of really, the Lord was dealing with me. I was finding out, searching for who am I and who do I want to be in life, and she did nothing but just love me and invite me to church, and I went to church with her a couple of times, and the third time I knew exactly what I had to do. Went down and accepted the Lord, so it was amazing.
Let me ask you right there, did everything just change instantly, or did it take some time for you to develop that relationship, or was it still a struggle for you? Because that's a big question for a lot of people.
Yeah. With me, it was more of an instant change, because of the place where I was, I had already quit smoking cigarettes and all the drugs and all that stuff by that time. Not for long, but I had just quit all that stuff and knew I was away from that lifestyle. I think that, but it was people that saw me like 2-3 months later was like, well, you look like a totally different person, just because that change had occurred. And but it still was kind of a process. I was very fortunate to get in good with some really good Christian young men who took me under their wing and showed me, okay, this is how you live, and this is the things that you do, and this is what it means to walk with the Lord. So.
I'm going to say something, and then you can say something if you want to. All right, we got that worked out? Okay. So I just thought, when you said that, how important, like this men's Bible study is that we're doing on Sundays. This will be kind of wrapping it up this week. But developing men inside of our church that will help mentor and direct and guide. It doesn't matter how old men are. There's some men probably in this room right now that are much older than you were and maybe going through the same thing even right now in their lives. So you can mentor somebody whether they're young or old when it comes to Christ, because we're learning that process of how to act and how to be and who to be inside of Him. And I just thought this men's class that we're going through is so important, because those men really changed your life over a process of time. And without them, without the teaching and the discipleship and the covering that they put over you, your life might not have turned out the way that it has now. So you got a question?
Well, yeah, this one came in like several times, and it's from different people, but it's the same question. So what would you tell a teenager who may be listening to you who says, well, he turned out okay, so will I, and they don't seem to understand that they're on the wrong path? So if they look at you and they say, well, he's sitting up on a green couch at church and everything's good, so it doesn't really matter what I do now as long as I get things together. What would your advice be to them?
The first thing I would tell them is that I am far and away the exception to the rule. Because I can tell you, out of 100 kids that were in the same crowd that I went to school with, I'm one of maybe 5 that are doing great now. The rest of them are still, they either went to prison or they died or they are not doing real hot right now. But also, I would say that when you look around at the people that you're hanging out with, make really sure that that's who you want to be. Because who you hang out with and who you surround yourself with is who you will become. So don't think that, oh, I'll hang out with these guys, but I'll be like this. It doesn't work that way.
Definitely, yeah, you definitely, that crowd that you're around definitely is your reputation as well, and who you are. Tell me a little bit more about these guys and how they mentored you, and how that changed the picture in your life. And
sure, yeah. Well, I was new. Where the church where I got saved at was a small kind of country church, and everyone was either like 60 or under 10. So I was like, well, I'm going to go find some people that are my own age to hang out with. And my dad went to Cross Point, so I went there and fell in with some good guys. Like Phil Scowden and Josh Thomas really were the two that kind of recognized that, this guy doesn't know what he's doing, or he's a new Christian, so we need to kind of show him. And they kind of took me in, and they, through the course of like inviting me to their homes, Bible studies, just invested in my lives. We worked out sometimes in the mornings, and just through those conversations of, I would say, well, what about this? Or I'm really struggling with this, or I really want to go, rip this guy's head off, or whatever I was dealing with, and they would say, well, look, this is the way that we handle this situation, or the way that you should, or here's some scriptures that'll help you with that. I mean, I just can't say enough about how crucial and how important that was, looking back on it, that they really helped me to grow.
Did it change your heart? I mean, because before you were telling me that you were a manipulator, that you would do anything you had to do to get whatever you needed to get to wherever you wanted to be. And is that the process that it took for you maybe not to become that? And then what did you become if it wasn't that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a part of that was broken off when I accepted Christ. Like just didn't have the desire. But there again, along with the spirit of joy that God has given me, God gave me, and it's even the name of my business, God gave me a heart of service, a spirit of service. And it's totally the opposite of selfishness and manipulation, is service. And if you can get to a place in your life where you get joy from serving other people, then you win, because that's what it's all about right there to me. I mean, to be able to help others and it make you feel good, I mean, everybody wins. And that's where God has taken me. And it's hard to believe sometimes where, how, looking at what I was, how do you get this from that? But God's the only way,
How is your relationship now with your parents? Is that?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
And finding out now, after they were praying for me in that time, I just didn't know about it, and stuff like that. So they weren't as bad as I thought they were when I was a teenager. No, but they when someone is rebellious to the level that I was, there's a point when there's not a whole lot you can do for them. They have to come to the place in their own mind and in their own heart where they are going to listen to reason, and stuff like that.
A couple of different people asked the second part of this question, but do you use your story to reach out to other troubled kids that are maybe in the same situation that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. I got in with the youth group at Cross Point. Phil Scotton was the youth pastor, and he was kind of one of my mentors. So we got into the youth group, and all the time, I can see God kind of has given me also a gift of intuition or something like that. So I can kind of see or feel what these kids are going through, and being the skate pastor and working with those kids, at every opportunity that I get, I try to pour into their lives and just let them know that that someone cares about them, and they always make it an open door policy where they can come talk to me about anything. And I have I don't really like broadcast my story like right when I meet you, but if I feel like there's an opportunity there, then I'll say, hey, I've been through some of these things, so if you want to talk, then it's come find me, and I always try to do that with the kids, for sure.
I just think it's neat that you went from this trying to fill your life with something, and so you tried all of this stuff that everybody else has to offer, and trying to find your way, and then God starts to work in your life. And I think it is the typical story in the sense, like you said at the beginning, that we always come back to that point where we say, I can't do anything else. I've tried to fill my life with everything, and then we just break. And sometimes that's when we're at the bottom, but and then we fill that void with God in our life, and then it totally changes who we are. It changes our attitude, changes our lifestyle, and so then you start to serve God, and like you said, this joy that you've got comes over your life. No longer are you looking over your shoulder, no longer are you wondering, but this attitude change, and you start ministering and then doing really what God calls us to do. Those people that mentored you, now you start mentoring other people and reaching out and ministering through the skate deal. And then also, Jim just got back from a mission trip to Africa, and just for a few minutes, I don't want to short us on this time, because this young man that really his life was nothing now goes to Africa and does an amazing amount of ministry there. And so, can you tell us, if we're just an ordinary Joe that our life isn't mixed up, show us what we could do in the future, like maybe something you did in Africa.
Yeah, the opportunity is really, really endless as far as missions goes. And our trip to Africa, if you guys are interested, the organization is called 1040i, and if you look up the website, they have a video that will tell you a whole lot more than I can in this little brief sitting. But the organization is just incredible. We go over there with teams of doctors and nurses, and they do surgeries, and people's lives are changed. We remodel schools, taking kids that's their way out. The mission statement of the organization is providing hope through health and education, because those are the two biggest needs of these people. If you can educate them, then that's their way out. That's their way to a better life. And if you can heal the serious problems that are wrong with them, then they can continue to live, or have a decent life. So those are the two areas we focused on this trip. And just to see all the different ways. I mean, every day there was a guy that we played a game, and it was because he pays attention and I pay attention, and it was like the game we would get together every night and say, what miracles did you see today? And he would tell me the miracles that he saw that day, and I would tell him the miracles that I saw that day. And sometimes I was a little light and he had a heavy one. Sometimes I had the big one and he was a little light, but every day there was stuff going on, and it happens here too. I mean, but you just, maybe in that setting, you're just looking for it, But so yeah, lots of surgeries, lives changed. I mean, people with clubbed feet, cleft lip. I mean, people that won't have a normal life otherwise are able to get this surgery that's not otherwise available to them. It's just huge, the life-changing impact that it has. And we did village wound care, where you just go out and treat people's cuts and hang out with the kids, and it's awesome.
Did you ever think, when you were 15, leaving your house, saying, I'm out of here, I don't have anything to do with this anymore? Mm-hmm. Did you think that 15 or 16 years later that you'd be considered a missionary around the world, that you'd be traveling, and that your life would be changed like that?
No, not at all. It's been a crazy ride. There's been things that even last year, I would say, I couldn't have guessed where I am this year. It's just, I'm always amazed at what God has in store, and His plan really is better than mine. So,
a lot of people will say, well, looking back at my life, I wouldn't change anything because it's made me who I am today. if you had that opportunity, one of the questions that came in, if you had that opportunity, would you change things that happened in your life?
You know, initially I would say, yeah, there are some things I'd like to change, but if there was a chance that I wouldn't be, then I wouldn't. You know, who I am today, because I wouldn't trade who I am today or my son or any of that stuff. I mean, if I had my ideal scenario, yeah, I would rather have done it, in the right way, but no, I probably wouldn't change it.
Right. You mentioned your son, and you said a while ago, questions were still coming in about your parents. You said your relationship was great with your parents now. Mm-hmm. What about your son and his mom? Is there any relationship there?
Yeah, they have. She lives in Texas, so it's not easy for them to see each other. But whenever she's up, he goes down and sees her in the summer, and he gets to go see her when she's up and stuff like that. So.
Well, Jim, not everybody will just come sit on her couch and tell their whole life story. And I'm telling you today that I want to thank you so much for being able to share with us, because I think that maybe our stories are not, maybe it's not drug, but maybe it's something else, that's similar. It's still something that the world's given us and we're dealing with and we're having a hard time. But I think your story gives us hope. It gives us a chance that we know that we can have a future, and that we really can be something in our lives. We don't have to be what the past has said we was. That we totally can change that reputation of who we are and what we are. One last question: those guys that maybe you were hanging out with, you're 5 out of 100. If they do they have the same opinion of you now as what they did then?
So of those guys,
sure. Those 100 guys that you partied with and that would know you now,
right?
Do they have the same opinion?
I would say that they can't, but again, I don't know, because I don't hang out with them anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But occasionally I will run across somebody, and they'll be like, "Wow, you're doing good," or "What are you up to?" And we'll have a conversation, and the end result of that conversation is always positive. That they feel good that I'm where I am, and hopefully I feel good that they're where they are, or that I say, well, come to church with me.
Yeah. How important is forgiveness in your life transformation, and everything that's happened to you? Not only forgiveness from God, but then you being able to forgive for things that happened to you. How important is that?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it doesn't work without it. Just being able to forgive yourself, even because otherwise you'll spend your whole time beating yourself up, or letting other people beat you up, or carrying that stuff around with you, and it will just poison you. You have to be able to let all that bad stuff go, to get it out and get it gone, and then move on from there.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for coming and being a part of this service this morning. And
thank you guys.
I really do appreciate it. I think it's just amazing what God does in people's lives, and Jim is not the only story probably in the room today. As we were kind of searching and we were looking, and we thought, we want to have interesting stories. We want to have people come and to tell us stuff that will really impact people's lives. And it is amazing, because the people that you're sitting right next to, they got these same stories, and you don't know it. You don't know it because maybe we've not asked them, or maybe they wouldn't be comfortable coming in and sitting down on a couch and sharing it. But they have some of the same heartaches and the same disappointments in life and the same things that they've struggled with, It's just life. We just, that's what I always say, we just go through life. But how we finish that, how we come out of that, really dictates who we are and what we're going to be. Jim Joyce is a Christian this morning that loves God more than anything else, more than drugs, more than anything that could capture his life, Jim Joyce has said this morning that he loves God. And so I want you this morning to say the same thing. And so I want to put you in a place where maybe you said, you know, I've come to a place in my life and I need out. I just need out. And I don't know if it's drugs. If it's drugs this morning, then you really know what Jim's talking about. And if it's something else, and I'm not even gonna waste the time to try to pinpoint and pick out what God's doing in your life specifically. You and God know what that is. And so as we worship together in this next song, I want you to do the same thing that Jim did when his grandma took him to that place. And Jim just said, it's enough. It's time. I want to change. I don't want to do it on my own anymore. I want this to be right. One of the things that I heard him say was, after I did that, I had joy. If you ever see me, you'll see me with a smile on my face. You say, oh, that's personality, right? That's just a personality. But when you're shooting up, or when you're drinking, or when you're in a place of compromise, you don't have a smile on your face. Not always, because there's always a high, and then there's this crash, at the end. And then there's a high, and then there's a crash at the end. You're not smiling at the end of the crash. But I want to pray with you before we sing, and I'm going to ask that God brings joy into your life, that you're able just to open up, and you're saying, God, just come in. Just do in my life what you did in Jim's life. Make me different than I am right now.